Bullying Prevention Program Coordinator with the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. I just want to go ahead and thank everybody for participating in our very first Take 30 webinar. And I want to go ahead and thank our generous partners and sponsors, Riverside Medical Clinic and the United Way of the Inland Valleys. So before I go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, just a couple of quick facts, which all of you already know how to use our chat box. But if you have any questions, you can either scroll down, and we do have an open question portion at the bottom of the webinar. And then we also have our chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can go ahead and leave questions during the presentation. We are going to have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation as well. And if you have any specific questions, you can go ahead and direct those directly to our speaker via email. And she'll go ahead and inform you all of that during her presentation. So I also want to go ahead and let everybody know about our upcoming bullying prevention conference on November 5th at the Riverside Convention Center. And if you would like information on how to register or possibly become a sponsor for the conference, you can go ahead and look on our website. It's www.antibullyinginstitute.org. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Ms. Judy French, and she is based out of the LA office of PACER's National Bullying Prevention Center. Let me make sure I get that right, but I'll go ahead and hand it off to Ms. Judy French.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Can I see the slides? Just want to make sure.
Oh, yes.
Yep. That's awesome. Just the bigger. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad you're here. It's really important that adults everywhere are getting a handle on what bullying is, and that we are speaking from the same page and with the same ideas. The research is telling us that the adult response to children's reports of bullying is so variable that they think sometimes we don't know what we're talking about, and our advice doesn't often work. So today is an opportunity that I'm really glad to have, and thank you to the Anti-Bullying Institute and Bianca and everyone who helped set this up, and for you for taking the time to be here. That tells me a lot about who you are to spend this time today. And we have a very short amount of time. So if you want to do a little bit more exploring, you will be able to do that on one of our 3 websites. PACER has been around for 40 years, helping children and their families, children with disabilities, learn to be self-advocates, helping families learn to be advocates for their children with disabilities. And doing that work over the 40 years, we were doing a lot of bullying prevention content as well, because children with disabilities are bullied at a rate of 2 to 3 times that of their peers without. And so in 2006, we decided that we would be very intentional about our bullying prevention work for all children with disabilities without, so that we could provide the very best research-based content for you to take and use. We're the resource people, and what we put up on these 3 websites, we want you to be using. The website on the left is for adults, professionals, parents, whoever is intersecting in the life of a child. The website in the middle is middle school and high school. And the website on the right is our elementary school, K5, K6, depending on the age of the child. Those 3 sites should provide you with a lot of information beyond what I give you today, which is going to be an overview in 30 minutes. It's a very complex topic, so I urge you to dig deep into our main website, pacer.org/bullying, and take a look at what you find, because that clarity is really important for all of us adults who are wishing to help and work on bullying in our communities. So on to it. I'm sure that most of you know that it's about 1 in 5 now students report being bullied during the school year. For a long time, it was stuck up around 30%, and then it's come down in the last 5 years. We also know that 60% or about 60% of kids do not report on the bullying that they're experiencing. So I always think this number could be a little bit low. So this is one of the reasons why we're concerned and why many people are concerned. that we really start implementing things to create healthier communities. And we'll be talking about that as well, because there are things that we can do. We spend a lot of time with bullying and bullying prevention, telling people what not to do. But now we really need to think about creating a world without bullying. We believe it's possible because bullying is a learned behavior. And if you take nothing else away from today, please remember that. No one, despite what people say, no one is born a bully. That is learned social behavior. And we believe that there's other learning that can take place and help create healthier communities where bullying does not flourish. So let's get on to it. Today, we're going to look at the dynamics of bullying, from definitions to the differences between bullying and conflict, bullying and harassment, different types, who is bullied, who bullies, and what adults can do. We can do a lot, and we can help our kids feel empowered to do a lot as well. So I often ask audiences to think about what adults told you when you were growing up about bullying, or if you had an act of aggression towards you and you went and you told an adult about it. And then look at this list and see if you heard one of these things. A lot of us, of course, heard words will never hurt you. I hear in many communities I go into that bullying is just a natural part of childhood, that that's just what kids do. It's like a rite of passage and it'll make you stronger. In fact, that idea that somehow bullying creates the conditions for resilience is really prevalent. I just talked to some parents this morning who were, what the dad was saying, bullying made him as strong as he is. And I said, well, let's take a look at that. Because in truth, bullying breaks kids down. It does not build people up. You may have survived it, but that's probably not why you're resilient, even though you remember it really, really well. So I challenge you to think about what you were told growing up. It's very likely that what you were told was what your parents were told, or your grandparents were told, or someone who was very pivotal in your life told you. My mother told me, just ignore it. They're jealous. It'll go away. It's a phase. It'll go away. My dad said, I'm going to teach you how to throw a punch and land it first, and they'll never bother you again. Many of the wise things that are given as advice to children end with that, and they'll never bother you again. But the things on this list here, and ignore it or throw a punch and that will solve it, those are things that often escalate and do not help whatsoever. So we really need to look at what we're saying to children, because when they come to us with their reports, that adult response is so very important, because it can dictate what happens next. It can dictate whether or not the child feels it's all their fault as a target, or if the child feels empowered to do something. It is never the target's responsibility to solve a bullying problem. And many of the things that we tell targets confer responsibility onto them, like ignore it. Basically, we often tell targets of abuse of any kind, if you have changed your behavior, or if you change your behavior, it will not happen again. And that's not true. We need to be looking at the behavior of the person doing the bullying. That's the behavior we need to focus on. And then we need to give some strength to the child who is being bullied, as well as the child who's bullying, because very often children who are bullying are being bullied themselves. So we need to be sensitive to all of the dynamics. Two things on this chart I would like to point out, look at a little bit more closely and think about. Telling the teacher about bullying is tattling. Many places that I go, snitches mean stitches. And so that's problematic, because if adults are not learning about the bullying that's occurring in kid world around them, we're not going to know often about what's happening. We need to encourage kids to report to us. So it's very important that the message that we're putting out to children is, look, tattling is what you do to get somebody in trouble. Telling is what you do to get help. And that's a really important lesson for human beings, to know you're not doing it all by yourself. If you need help, you probably have to reach out to someone, and identifying who, for a child, is a good adult to go to, and making sure that that trust is there in the relationship and that they want to report to an adult. Very, very important. You'll hear this throughout the presentation. We have to keep the lines of communication open. And it's tricky when you're a parent. It's tricky when you're a teacher or anyone who works with children. They're changing all the time. But that active listening is very, very important. The last statement I want you to look at is, some people deserve to be bullied. And while on the face of it, that's a terrible statement, it's a horrible thing. If you look at what people find funny, if you look at television programs, comedy, morning, shock jock radio, where they're always going after somebody, it's always okay. Certain kinds of humor about certain kinds of people. Nerds, for one thing, that's a safe way to get after somebody. The Big Bang Theory trades on a lot of that humor. And it's really difficult because what might be okay in your family culture to joke about may not be at all okay to joke about in another family's culture. And when that child that's used to joking and making jokes about people's bodies at home goes to school and makes a joke with their peers about bodies, body parts, race, religion, things that you might talk about openly at home, you may find that your child burns bridges easily. So it's difficult for kids to bridge that gap. They get to learn the norms of their own family and they take that out to society. It's really tough. So just some things to be sensitive about as we work with kids and try to raise them well and healthy. So this definition I'm going to give you here, what we have done is gone to the very best definitions and pulled the hallmarks, the commonalities between all these different definitions, and boiled it down to three of the most important that appear most often in the definitions. There's one thing that's missing here, but let's do the three because I want you to have something in your mind that you can remember that's memorable. So here we are. Hurt or harm to another person that is done on purpose. It's intentional. The goal is to hurt or harm. Now, this is tricky if your children are younger. Preschool, we don't use the word bullying at all. We do see aggressive behaviors in preschool children, but until a child knows that what they are doing is causing hurt or harm in another person, they really have that piece, we don't call it bullying. So it may be aggressive behavior. It may need a lot of attention from adults, but it isn't bullying until that other child, to the child doing the bullying, knows that what they're doing is hurting or harming another person. The target in a bullying situation has difficulty stopping the behavior. And the reason why they can't stop it by themselves, the reason why they need us adults to step in and create the safety net, is because there's an imbalance of power between the target and the kid doing the bullying. So the kid doing the bullying has more power than the target. It could be physical power. It could be social power. They might have more friends. But whatever it is, the person doing the bullying has more power. Now, the one thing that's missing here is repetition. This is not, what I'm giving you right here on this slide is not a legal definition. This is just a way for you to remember it. What's missing here is that repetition piece. And for schools and school policy and legal entities trying to prove bullying, what they're going to want to see is a repeated series of events, a prevalence of aggressive behavior or bullying behavior. So for those of you who are worried about bullying for your child, you must document everything. Yeah, even small things. Just write it down in a date, and so that you have a sense. Has this happened more than once? Is this a pattern? Because that's what schools will be looking for. Very important that all of us understand, especially when our children are younger, what the difference is between bullying and conflict. And this is hard when they're young because it all looks kind of aggressive sometimes. Even as early as 3, we see them hurtling their bodies into one another. But here's a way to remember it. With conflict, it's equal power, even equal playing field. Kids are giving as good as they get. And with conflict, when a child understands that they are causing hurt or harm in the peer that they're interacting with, they generally stop. It may not be instantly. It may take some while for them to understand. But they stop because they don't want to lose friends. They want to keep friends. So with conflict, a child generally will modify their behavior when they know that what they're doing is causing harm in that relationship. Kids know instinctively they want friends. They want people that care for them and that are in relationship with them. That is protective in a group situation. So they want a friend. They don't want to lose friends. With bullying, when a child learns that what they're doing is hurting someone, remember the goal of bullying is to hurt or harm. So when they figure that out, they keep pushing that button. It gives them a feeling of satisfaction and control. So that is the difference between conflict and bullying. Bullying and harassment are two different things as well. And we use harass as a verb to sort of mean bullying behavior. But when we're speaking of bullying in a legal context, bullying that is done to protected classes, so there's more than a few of them, but the most common ones are disability, ethnicity, gender. Those things are protected by law. And so please look up protected classes if you're worried that your child is experiencing discriminatory harassment. Stopbullying.gov, the government's website, has really good verbiage on this, and it's worth your time to take a look at the difference. Most adults just use these terms interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. So definitely look that up. So when bullying becomes harassment, it would meet the threshold of harassment and meet the criteria for federal protection if it interferes seriously with a student's ability to participate in school, to learn, and is based, again, as I just said, on these protected classes: race, national origin, color, sex, age, disability, or religion. Discriminatory harassment is different from bullying. Yeah, so we need to be very clear. Conflict to bullying, bullying to harassment. These are things you might want to explore further if this is a particular worry of yours. Types of bullying. This is just how we do it. Other bullying prevention organizations might put it in, different types of bullying. They might name them differently or make different categories. This is how we look at it. Personally, I believe that all bullying ends up being psychological because it works on my brain and makes me react differently. But this is useful if you're trying to teach kids that there are multiple ways to bully. When I was growing up, we thought of bullying as this big tough kid who beat you up and took your lunch money, but it's really just part of it. And today, most kids are pretty savvy about physical options because there's usually evidence. The most common kind of bullying is verbal, and that is a component of cyberbullying as well. But using words is easy, quick, direct. The kind that's difficult also to detect sometimes because verbal bullying can happen very quickly. Emotional social is also very tough for adults to police and detect. Kids often don't think that things like exclusion or kinds of manipulation, lying, gossip, that can be bullying, and it certainly can be. And that is a big staple of middle school. So where bullying peaks, that's the kind of stuff that people remember the most. Hits very hard. Cyber is the big monster in every room wherever I go. If you have young children, before things start to happen, please take a look at our advice and others' advice on restricting and limiting technology, setting boundaries as firmly as you can. There's a lot that happens there, and it's good to be ahead of it if you can. If not, please just tell your family we need a reset and start over. So I often counsel families, it's never too late to put some of those things in, and people will not be happy. But modeling good use of technology is very, very important. In fact, for all types of bullying, it isn't just what we tell kids. They need to be seeing the things that they need to do. So we have negative social behaviors like bullying. Here are all the types. If we want them to do the pro-social behaviors, the good stuff, they need to see that too. Otherwise, they can't do them. So that's how they learn them. And we need to be modeling for technology and every other thing. Who bullies, who gets bullied, and why? Students who bully or get bullied could be anybody. They can be any size, age, or gender. Often when I speak to kids, they always think it's the most popular kids who are bullying others, but that's not true. The most popular kid, the kid that looks like they have it all, could be being bullied. Kids tend to keep these things private. They're ashamed. Often they think they've brought it upon themselves. So really, it can be anybody. For kids who are bullying, the most common or the highest risk factor is a sense of entitlement about difference. Their family is better because X. They have more money, they have more stuff, they have a nicer car. My family's been speaking English for 3 generations and you just got here. Things like that. Anything that could indicate power, any sense of entitlement over difference. Also, kids who are bullying get that sense of control and satisfaction out of a negative reaction in someone else. A higher risk factor for a target, and this isn't a guarantee, but there are 2 things that come up the most. One is the child who is isolated, the child who is alone. That is a pretty big risk factor for being bullied. If even one child stands next to another child, that reduces the risk that the first child will be bullied. Often, targets of bullying can be kids with disabilities who don't read social cues well, but provide a big reaction when they are bullied. We see that a lot. Any difference is really a risk factor, and that difference could be real or perceived. So, for instance, when the word gay is used as a slur for kids, doesn't matter if the kid is actually gay, the target is actually gay or not. It's just used that way, and if it hits a chord and there's a reaction, it might be used over and over again. So those are some of the risk factors for who gets bullied and who bullies. The impact of bullying, we hear a lot in the media around, tragic outcomes. But I like to tell kids and parents there are a lot of steps in between the initial act of bullying or even, the beginning of a pattern of bullying. There's a lot of steps. And the more that we can keep those lines of communication open with kids who we influence, kids who we care about and who care about us and who trust us, the more that we can encourage them to speak to us, the better off we will be. We'll not get to number 3, to self-harm, to suicidal ideation. So there's some narratives right now out in society due to stuff in the media of, you get bullied and you commit suicide. I tell kids and parents all the time, there can be many, many, many steps in between where adults need to circle the wagons and provide support. We can't do it unless we know what's happening. If you feel that you may have a child who's being bullied or you wonder what that looks like and you want to be, sensitive to seeing it in your environment, it does present like depression. So kids who used to be interested in school or sports may pull back from those activities if that's where the bullying is taking place. Same thing with the bus or, onset of mysterious illnesses when it's time to go to school, things like that. So things to be aware of, that's what it can look like. But if that adult support comes in and kids trust that, we know we're going to do what's best for them and we're going to help and we've got their back, that will help you get that reporting so that it won't get down to those tragic outcomes. Why students might not tell, I always throw this in here because I want us to remember why we didn't tell about the things that happened to us. A couple of the ones that really, really hurt my heart have to do with the adult response. They decide that adults don't care. They're going to overreact. They're going to make it worse. And they won't be protected. Will actually, cause retaliation. And that often happens. That's why our response has to be so careful and subtle. When I talk to schools, I say, do you have anonymous reporting ability for your students? Do you have a way for people to tip you off without having to identify themselves? That allows a school to carefully also investigate without outing any of the witnesses or the target themselves. And there are schools that do this very, very well. So that's something that I think is a best practice, anonymous reporting for sure. But these are things this is from our teen website, and there's things to really ask ourselves about, are we providing a safe landing pad for reports, even if they're hard for us to take? Even if they come at the last tag end of the day when you're so tired, find a way, to make that report be part of your daily communication, so they know, oh, this is the time and I can talk, or I can go anytime. This is the real toolkit. And those first 4 are what kids who are being bullied tell us that they want from the adults around them in their world. And if I had a list of 100 things, the first 99 would be listen. Active listening, where you are just repeating what they are saying instead of leaping to the 5th and 6th ones, which is where I would go naturally as a parent. I thought that was parenting, giving them the information, giving them the advice, strategies. I'm going to get in there and fix it for you. And what kids really want is that powerful act of listening and supporting them. I do have this tendency in myself, and I see it in many adults, to go all NCIS on the problem. What are the facts, ma'am? And, give me all that. And kids shut down. So we've really got to be patient. And we can be supportive, even if it turns out that our child was also bullying, or something about the dynamic wasn't quite bullying. So as long as we're there with that active listening, that will give us an opportunity to get more information. One of the tools that we have up on the website, I cannot urge you strongly enough to take a look at this, because this is both a tool for advocacy, for you adults to advocate for kids really effectively, but it's a tool to teach them self-advocacy. And self-advocacy and self-efficacy are 2 things that if kids get the feeling that they can create change in their world, they get some of that power back that a bullying situation has taken from them. So I can't urge you strongly enough. Take a look at this. It's on our main website, pacer.org/bullying. It's under the resources tab under handouts. It is a brilliant tool to use, even if you're just working through an issue, even if your child's only been a witness, something's bothering them. Because the second question, the magic question, says, what would you like to be different about this situation? What would you like to have changed? And then the third step is, we're going to circle the wagons and figure out who can help you do that. So again, not conferring responsibility on the child, but allowing them to give input and be part of the solution. It's brilliant. It's a way for kids to feel that they matter, that their voice matters. And by the way, what most kids who are bullied want is for the bullying to stop. It's adults that create the environment that says we want punishment, when what they really mean is we want accountability. And that, of course, is appropriate. But very often in schools, there's an idea that I need to know that the kid who made my kid suffer is suffering as well. So those are things that we don't control, because you won't know because of privacy things, what's happening on the other end of that. But this tool will help your child. If your child is caught up and stuck in a bullying dynamic, this should help a lot. So take a look at that. Active bystanders, we talk a lot about this. Bullying actually ends up being a small percentage of what's happening at school, a pretty small percentage. Some experts think up to 90% of kids in school are not involved in a bullying dynamic. Some places a little lower, but let's say, between 70 and 90 is where most experts say, let's split the difference and call it 80%. That's a lot of power. If you can get to students who are not involved in bullying and tell them what to do, the number one thing is spend some time with a student that's being bullied. Spend some time with a kid who is alone and ask them if they want to come join you. That's what kids who are bullied want the very most. And by the way, those kids who are bullying may be being bullied as well. What we want students to understand about bullying is that the roles are very fluid. And I never use the word bully, because once a child is tagged with that word, they are tagged with that word forever. We don't want kids thinking that they are stuck in roles. So bystanders can do a lot by listening to the student, by telling the student, no, you did not deserve that. And if they're brave enough, getting the student away from the situation. But it is no longer considered a best practice to tell kids to stand up into the bully's face and be aggressive, because that can lead to retaliation for a bystander as well as the target. We don't want that. So these things are really the things that kids who are being bullied want the very most. One of their peers to spend time with them. Long term, the real bullying prevention tools are these: pro-social behaviors. They cannot be acquired by talking about them. And I realize this is ironic because I am talking about them. But they are learned through watching. They are learned through adults modeling and actively promoting these behaviors in their own lives. So it would be one thing to try to explain to kids about acceptance of difference and inclusion. It's another thing to be actively including people, not talking down about other adults or other children in front of children, showing them, how kindness, acceptance, and inclusion works in life. That is the way that pro-social tools are acquired by children. Same thing with negative behaviors. If we want to create healthier communities where bullying does not flourish, these 3 pro-social behaviors seem to be the ones right now that the research is telling us could be the most successful at doing that. We do know that where these things are being promoted and modeled, bullying has a harder time taking root. So something to think about. It's something that in faith communities, these things a lot of people talk about. These aren't new ideas, but we're now getting research that tells us, yeah, this is the stuff. This has got to happen. And I sense that people are rather hungry to hear that message. Unity Day is coming up. October starts National Bullying Prevention Month, and we also started Unity Day. So if you can get your schools to join in, wear orange on that day if that works out for them. I have lots of free posters I can send your schools. You can hit me up for that. I'm happy to do it. I'm sure the Anti-Bullying Institute probably has some things planned as well. But this is a fun way to just say, we're together. We all care about how people interact at school. And we're not going to accept bullying as a rite of passage anymore. We're done with that. We're moving on to other things. Kindness, acceptance, and inclusion is the way we're going to go. If you need to get a hold of me, or you're curious about something that I said today, you'd like to see the research on it, that's my email. And I guess we're going to take a look to see if there are any questions. Maybe somebody can let me know if there was anything that came up.
Okay. Yeah.
I see that one. Okay, I see the question about bullying coming from home. I will take that one, yeah. So the question that came up is, what about if bullying is coming from home? How can you address something like that? So I presume that the basis for that question is that it's not your family, it's another family where there might be bullying. The best thing that you can do if that's impacting your child's life is I would hope to, anyways, you were doing this anyways, but to create a collaborative relationship with the school, if that's where the bullying is presenting, if it's happening on a sports team or a theater group or a music group, that you get to the people who are running things. So that would be the administration at your school. It's usually a principal or a counselor, and work very hard to make sure there's adult supervision at school in the places where your child is, where that other child might be. And then work on creating, again, this healthier environment by supporting the programs that they may already have in place around kindness, acceptance, and inclusion. At AUC, they use Second Step. It's a very well-regarded program. It's evidence-based. They also have a lot of push on restorative justice, which can help with conflict. So, you're supporting that is about the best you can do. It is very much not advised for you to become involved with the other family in an adversarial stance, even if you're trying to be helpful. That tends to blow up in parents' faces and create big problems. I would attempt in every way to support what the school is doing for positive behavioral support and things like that. So it's not a perfect response. I wish I could tell you more. I should have a little sign over my head that says, bullying advice must be situation specific, because without knowing all the details there, it's hard to get much more specific than that.
Yes, I have
Is there anything else? Any other
I have a comment for you, Judy. And they went ahead and wrote, at elementary, it is many times challenging to sift what is intentional and what is unintentional, but can be taken in a hurtful way. I try to teach, think helpful or hurtful before speaking. So that was one of the things that we.
Yes, I'm seeing that right now. And that's excellent, because what we were also trying to give kids those those parameters for what acceptable behavior is. I've heard a lot of different ways of getting at that. I know one of the principals that I speak to regularly says I try to make the difference between hurtful, rude, mean, and bullying, because a lot of that subtlety is lost. That's up to us. And I'm an educator, so my bias is education. I think we very much need to be very, very clear about the definitions between conflict and bullying, because what I also get a lot of is kids are throwing out this bullying word, and it's not bullying. So we have to be super clear. And yes, teach them to press pause before they go off and react. But there are a lot of kids early on, the impulse control is not part of their development yet, and things are going to happen. Sometimes we're asking kids to be resilient, we're asking them to be peacemakers when it's not something that even adults do very well. So again, the scaffolding from adults like you're doing, helpful or hurtful, I love that. I think every adult actually on social media could be doing that as well. And I think that's brilliant. That's great. Someone said, what are some ideas for anonymous reporting? So here's the problem with the lockbox in the office, is that you have to walk into the office to put it in there. That's a problem, because if you're a kid in middle school, why'd you go into the office? What were you doing there? So schools handle this differently. By the time they get to high school, a lot of high schools will have online or text-based anonymous reporting, and I think that's excellent, because that's the mode the kids use anyways. They're going to be doing it through technology. That means it'll happen. And so lockbox, if that's all that it is, and there isn't another way, at least there's that. But there have been very savvy administrators, even people who are just recades on the yard, who know how to create confidence and trust with kids when they report, that they're not going to make it obvious who reported. So that takes a savvy and probably a fairly experienced person. But once they understand that anonymity preserves that relationship, that communication with the kid, and they understand why it's happening, most people are eager to just know how, and they'll figure it out. So that's a really important thing to do, however. And then checking it, yes, counselors usually end up getting that job, assistant principals usually end up getting that job, and if they have to escalate it, they will escalate it. You can print the slides, you can have the slides. I will give them to Bianca, and she can do whatever. You may do whatever you wish. We also have, if you want to take a presentation to your school, or if your child is old enough to want to talk about bullying, we have a Bullying 101 for elementary, which is on the elementary website. We have a Bullying 101 for middle school. And you can take those and adapt those as well. We want this information to be out there. Take it, use it. We're happy to provide it for you. Let's see. Parent videos. We do not have parent videos. We do have a huge section, though, on our website called What Parents Need to Know. And that's on the main website, pacer.org/bullying. We devote maybe a quarter of the site to that, and it goes from definition all the way through to rights, law and policy, if you're looking at discriminatory harassment, to speaking and working with the school. And you'll notice I'm always urging you to be in partnership with the school. Collaborative is where it's at. Got to keep those lines of communication open. And we have so many tabs and subtabs in that What Parents Need to Know section about successful and productive school-parent relationships. I urge you to look there, because there's a lot of good stuff there. I was just talking to parents this morning who were like, I can't even get my kid to talk. I'm like, well, we actually have scripted dialogue for you. We actually have sentences and questions. You can get those reports up in that What Parents Need to Know section.
That's great.
And going through those sections is really useful. It's some of the best stuff we have.
So I think.
So let's see.
And then we have another comment below. And somebody just commented on that they love Second Step.
Yes. Yeah. I think when it's used, really used, it's an active part of school life, and people are trained, and it's being promoted as, that social emotional curriculum is being promoted as much a priority as math or science, which I think people are getting towards. And for some schools, they're there. They know the overt curriculum is math and science and reading. The covert curriculum is the social emotional curriculum, and that's what kids are really interested in. I can't concentrate on math if I'm worried about what's going to happen in the hallway after math, or if I don't think I have any friends. It's still the same for us adults. We just tend to be a little more abstract about it, but we are still worried about all those same issues. Kids cannot compartmentalize. So when schools are prioritizing the social emotional and using programs like Second Step, that can change the whole landscape. What I hope for schools is that they're giving parents this language as well, because closing that gap so that all the adults in a child's world are conversant, using the same terms, using the same concepts and ideas, that could make a huge difference for kids coming to us and then going back with really useful information. So none of that old fashioned, just ignore it and it will go away, or pop them in the nose and it'll go away. None of that.
Those were all the questions and comments that we have. But as I stated in the beginning, if there's any specific questions or comments that you would like to send over to Judy, her email is on the slide. And I will go ahead and send all of these slides as well as information on our upcoming parent class webinars as well. So I want to go ahead and thank Judy French for your wonderful presentation today. Thank you for being our first speaker for our very first Take 30 webinar.
Thank you. I am so honored, and thank you all for spending your time here with us. This tells me a lot about you. You're good people. All right.